So Hayley, welcome to the Every Mind podcast. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. We just had a casual conversation for 8 minutes, and I was like, we should have hit record because it
We
was
should have.
a good conversation already. So no, thank you for taking the time out to join us on today's podcast. I'm really looking forward to this interview. But I think we always start with a little bit in regards to your background, and I think it's always best for you to share that rather than me, pull something from online and do my best to tell your background. So if you can give everyone listening a little bit about who you are, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Hayley. I am a qualified occupational psychologist, have been in the profession for almost 25 years. Didn't start off as that. I won't go through my dim and dark history, but I did a series of kind of just random jobs after I did my undergrad, and then fell into occupational psychology by accident. It wasn't kind of part of my grand plan, but I feel really fortunate because I fell completely and utterly in love with the work that we do. I left. I kind of veered away from pure occupational psychology. So, doing stuff around organisations and leadership. I veered away. I went into local government for a bit. And my plan was only to go for 2 years. So I started off my career at the BBC and then went into local government. And so my plan was 2 years. I went in as the head of organisational development for an authority. And I ended up staying 11. I fell completely and utterly in love with local government and the wider public sector. And I think it was the first time probably in my life that I really understood the power of doing work that connects to your personal values. So doing social good and helping some of the most vulnerable people in society is really important. And even though I wasn't necessarily doing that in a direct way in my first role in local government, I was in some shape or form helping people in the authority do that. So I ended up in a series of increasingly bigger, corporate, gnarly at times leadership roles, and then made the decision in 2016 to leave. So I had a series of really awful personal things happen. So losing a loved one and a terminal diagnosis for another loved one. And I was in my early 40s and I wanted to come home to my roots as an oc psych. And I'd wanted to set up on my own for a while, but just hadn't had the courage to do it. And it really took two massive things happening to almost light that fire, if you like, and give me the courage. And so I've been working for myself as a practitioner, as an independent practitioner since 2016. And I also teach as well. So I teach at several universities on master's programs in occupational psychology, and I co-manage the MRes in professional practice in occupational psychology at Birkbeck. So that's for trainee psychologists who are wanting to start their doctorate journey. So that's, it might not feel like a nutshell to your listeners, but that is a nutshell, because I could go into lots of detail. But I've got a very varied history, but at the core of it has always been my love of understanding behaviour, understanding why we do the things we do. I'm fascinated by that and always have been ever since I was a little girl.
Yeah, I mean, this is the podcast where we'll probably dive deeper into a lot of that stuff anyway, because I'm always really intrigued by it. But thank you for sharing. And it's great to hear, that kind of mix of experience, I'm sure, across, local government and then different sectors. And then, now working for yourself, I'm sure you've learned lots along the way. And definitely because of the aim of today's podcast, we'll dive into a lot of that stuff. But, I'm always really intrigued in the kind of personal element behind it as well. And, you said that, it's been something that you've always been aware of in terms of like people's behaviors and stuff like that. Do you know personally where that comes from? Have you?
Yeah, I grew up in a volatile household, shall we say. So I'm a working class girl, grew up in London, South London in the 70s. So poor, a very poor background. And I in a volatile household. And so I think there were two things that really stood out for me at an early age. The first was becoming hyper attuned and sensitive to almost like blinking, you'd miss it, like micro changes in the environment, just the vibe that someone gives off, like how their mood can change. I'm becoming hyper attuned to that. And there was some research, I think it was from Sweden, there was some research anyway that said children that grow up in volatile and or violent households are more likely to be emotionally intelligent, in inverted commas, as adults, because you learn very early on to just become hyper attuned to other people's emotions and feelings and how they might change. So that was the first thing. The second was, as I say, you know, working class girl in a poor household in part of South London. I grew up in a part of South London that I'm ashamed to say was a host for the National Front, as it was known, and some of my friends were from different ethnicities at primary school, and just seeing how other people treated them, I just became really, again, hyper aware and curious about how people can treat each other, how people can behave in awful ways to other humans, but also acts of kindness to each other as well. And again, I became really interested in why are they behaving like that and why are they behaving like that. And so it kind of really, those two things together just really combined to just make me naturally focus on and always paying attention to behaviour, whether it's other people's or whether it's my own, and just always asking the question, what's behind that? What's going on there?
It's really interesting. It makes me think a lot about, I've explored that a lot recently because, you know, I always say I was brought up in a loving household, and I was, but equally at the same time, you know what, you know, my dad sadly took his own life when I was 18, and, you know, I was always of the belief that we didn't know that there was anything wrong with my dad until it was almost too late. But at the same time, there was definitely times where I felt that I probably wasn't able to get my emotions served right by my dad, because of course he's definitely dealing with stuff that we didn't know that he was dealing with, and vice versa. You know, my mum, she was extremely caring, compassionate, she would do everything for me and my brother, but you know, she had her own challenges from her childhood, and that turned into, you know, troubles with alcohol and everything else. So it's funny you say that, because I've always looked at, you know, my sensitivity and my, you know, ways of like picking up with emotions. And I think relevant to your story, a lot of us do it to protect ourselves sometimes, right? And I'm sure from your example,
absolutely,
volatile household, you're doing that because you want to make sure you're protected. You want to see it before it gets to the point of, you know, and it becomes too late. So
absolutely,
it's super interesting. And I'm sure, you know, as you've gone into adulthood and stuff, there's been lots of work that you've done on that as well.
Yeah, I ended up seeing a therapist back in 2005. So I had the option of going, this is when I worked at the BBC, I had the option of going on the leadership program that was being run at that point. Now, the strange thing is that I was helping to deliver that program. So it felt a bit strange. I was just turned 31 at that point. And I think the start of your decades are natural points where most of us pause, take stock. We look back and go, you know, what have I achieved or what have I done? Do I want to carry on doing the same thing? And what does the next decade bring me? And I've always found that for me personally, like the start of each decade has been a natural kind of crossroads point. And so for me at the age of 31, I felt like I needed something different. I was becoming really aware of some of my unhelpful behaviours. So the behaviours that had served me, as you say, that had protected me as a kid, that I'd taken into my younger adulthood, and then subsequently as a working adult, the things that had served and protected me actually were becoming my undoing as a professional and as a leader. And so I felt I needed something deeper. And to my boss's credit at that time, he was like, fine. He said, let's not waste money putting you on the leadership program. We'll spend that money. And so they funded me seeing this coach who was a therapist by background. So they were an executive coach. It was one of the toughest things I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
But one of the most powerful. I mean, I went to a very dark place part way through, and she said that was a natural part of the process, because we went right back to when I was like 2 years old, and we met every week for an hour for 20 weeks, and it was brutal. But I came out, it was almost like a butterfly coming out of the chrysalis, and it helped me make so much sense of stuff. It also helped me own my own, part of my vernacular, my own shit. It just helped me like start taking responsibility rather than blaming everything around me. And hugely powerful to go through that. And it's interesting because when you train as a clinical psychologist, that's a natural, that's expected. But when in the other disciplines, for example, occupational psychology, which is the field that I'm in, that's not expected. But I think it should be.
Yeah,
I think it should be. I think anybody who is practicing some form of psychology and working with the public, you need to have gone through some form of intervention, whether it's coaching or counselling or therapy, or to help you face yourself and know what you stand for and understand more about your own biases. And hugely powerful. Yeah,
I'm a big advocate of it. I put a post out the other day about, just finished a session with Anne, the therapist, the lady who helped me when I was 21. And, that's, fast forward years and years and years, and I still go. I don't go as regularly as I used to, but I still go. And I put the post out there to say, I didn't go today because I'm broken. I didn't go today because there's anything wrong with me. I went there because, I want to be the best leader, dad, husband, son that I can be. And it's funny. I always walk into those sessions with Anne now. I don't really need this. Don't really need this. I'm good. And then you walk out with like, oh wow, like I've gone deeper. Like I need to do this. I understand this differently. It's. I think I'm a huge advocate of it. And equally, I think bringing it into the work that you now do around leadership and management. In my experience, and I'm generalizing here, a lot of them are quite specifically of a leader in a business. There's these walls, there's these kind of like, barriers in the way of like, I don't want to talk about this stuff. Is that something that you've seen in the work that you do? And also, how do you look to kind of address that?
Yeah, I think it varies. So it depends on the context. I always joke with my students, that's the standard psychologist response to anything, is it depends. So it depends on the group or the person that I'm working with. It depends on things like their background, their age, their gender, their beliefs, their life experiences, their professional experience. It just depends on a whole host of things. So, so for example, I was working with an NHS trust a couple of weeks ago. And it was medical and non-medical staff. So it was a mixed group. And they were really open. Most of them were like hugely open about talking about this stuff and talking about behaviour and their own and their biases. And then I might work with another group because they're coming from different contexts who just poo-poo it and think it's all a bunch of. As one leader I once had the pleasure of working with for a team build said, this is all just pseudo nonsense, pseudo scientific nonsense.
Yeah.
So, and that's his right to think that. So yeah, it depends. And I try not to judge, particularly when comments like that are made. Again, I take it back to what's behind that. Why are you doing that? There's a great book that I've been slowly but surely, because it's not an easy book, called Why Do You Behave Like That? And it's about how our childhood stories, we take them into our adult lives, and as leaders, we take them into how we show up as leaders. It's a really good book for coaches who work with leaders on their behaviour. And some people are open to that and some people aren't. And again, as I say, it depends.
Yeah, I love that answer. Yeah, it's very, very, very relatable. I did a session this morning with one of our clients, Superdry. So like all of their managers in stores.
Oh, like, nice. Free clothes.
They love it. No, not yet. But they loved it, right? And it was like, let's talk about vulnerability and it was engaging. And the client told me that would be the case. And then I've had examples like you've just shared there where he'll be delivering to, I don't know, a client in a different sector, maybe a financial sector or something like that. And it's, very much sit down, oh, is this going to make me mental, this talk? Or, I'm busy. I've got calls midway through. Just going to let you know that. And I used to take that really to heart. But now I do the same as you. I'm like, what's behind that? Like, why are you reacting in this way when you see like mental health? Let's talk about our feelings. On a presentation. So I think it'd be really good to know a little bit more about kind of like the exact work that you do, because I know you've got Halo Psychology and also as well Find Your Hive and Thrive, right? So what's the kind of like the stuff that you do on a day-to-day as an example?
So day-to-day, so with my Halo Psychology hat, so around 50% of my work through Halo is coaching. So in particular, executive coaching. So I work with anyone from kind of a first-time manager, the rabbit in headlights, what the hell do I do now? I've got all these people, all the way through to kind of board level chief execs, managing directors and chairs. And so that kind of deep one-to-one work, and I love that. I always feel really honoured when people select me as their coach, because I believe in people giving people agency. It's their choice as to whether they work with me or not. So that's like 50% of my work, and then the other 50% is really a mix of running masterclasses and workshops and courses for leaders and managers. And HR and OD practitioners as well on, the most favourite topics at the moment, and have been unsurprisingly for the last few years, are around resilience, psychological safety. My flagship programme is How to Build a High Performing Team. So I run that a few times a year, but predominantly is stuff around resilience and creating psychologically safe cultures and really exploring leadership. And then I do the occasional kind of away day or team building, team development. And the thing that clients say they like is I'm not kind of coming in as this theorist who just spouts a load of stuff, but they've never lived in the real world. I've been in operational and strategic leadership roles that have been quite brutal at times, and so a lot of them appreciate the reality and the pragmatism as well, all underpinned by evidence. I Find Your Hive and Thrive is more a passion project, if you like. So that's where I work with women one-on-one who are either wanting to start their own business or maybe are in the early stages. So my doctoral research was in female entrepreneurship, and in particular, how women define success and how they succeed in the first 3 years. So we know that in the UK, for example, around the percentages vary according to who it is saying it, but on average, around 60% of businesses close in their first 3 years in the UK, and quite a significant number of those are female owned. So I was really interested in, can I speak to some women in one of my studies who've managed to navigate that really turbulent first 3 years that we all go through as business owners, and what are the things that they do? So I explored the psychological factors and how they define success. So I looked at things like that. What are their values? What are the competencies they use, and any kind of strong personality characteristics? So one of my studies was the first ever to look at values in relation to female entrepreneurship and business ownership in general. So I've been working with increasing numbers of women, some of whom are still in corporate leadership roles, who are wanting to make that leap, but they're a bit frightened. I was coming across that more and more. It was one of the motivations for my doctoral research. And then I'm working with a few, as I say, who are maybe in their second year and they feel a bit stuck. So very varied. And then I run one of the programs at Birkbeck as well. So it keeps me out of mischief, Paul. Got lots on.
There's a lot. And I really like the idea of helping women into entrepreneurship. Again, in the HR community in particular, I do see a lot of people wanting to jump ship from that corporate world. Not everyone, you and I know it takes a certain mind to navigate through self-employed and entrepreneurship. But there's a lot that I'm seeing now set up as like consultants and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. So and especially with, you know, what's happened in the last few years, there's definitely been a bit more of a push to it. But I think having that support from someone who has done it and other people that have done it, I think is really, really important. But, you know, the main question I've got is how do you personally juggle all of that? Because there's a lot there. So I know we were speaking about it before I hit record, but what do you do to make sure you're juggling all of that whilst obviously prioritizing your own self?
Yeah, great question. It's one that I get asked quite a lot, particularly from those who were wanting to make the leap into being their own boss, and from some of my students as well. I've always been very good at managing my time and having boundaries ever since I was young, and particularly when I went into the world of proper work, not just a Saturday job, when I went into my first kind of corporate job in my early 20s. So it's always kind of come naturally to me, but I think I've had to really amplify what I do as time has gone on. I mean, when I worked in local government, there was one point where I had 3 leadership roles. So I had my own and I was covering 2 others, big services. And so I had to really have boundaries in place whilst making sure I kept an eye on what matters. And part of that is being prepared to not do everything, which I think societally we're not geared up for, where unless we're kind of busting through absolutely every single item on our to-do list, it's a failure. I was working with a leadership group last week. They're on a leadership program for their profession, so they're from different organisations, and we were talking about exactly this. And there's a real power in what really matters to me to get done, and what am I prepared to say no to. So that's kind of often my starting point. As we were talking about before you press record, Fridays are my non-work day, and I've kept that. So as I was saying, you know, Fridays originally were, I was looking after my mum who was terminally ill. It was like hospital trips or going out for lunch with her and having some time with her before she died. And I ended up keeping that Friday as time for me. So I've already kind of got that space. One of the things that comes up with the women that I'm working with who are either wanting to set up their own business or have set up their own business is knowing what you're going to say no to, and clients you're going to say no to as well. So I don't say yes to every piece of work that comes through. Now, I know there's an element of privilege around that, particularly at the moment, cost of living crisis and that. But I think taking it back to what does success mean for me? What do I want Halo to be about? And what do I want my reputation to be about as Hayley? I want to make sure I'm always doing the best work possible. You know, as a practitioner and the kind of work that I do, I'm having to show up and be my best self. Well, I can't be my best self if I'm saying yes to everything and cramming my days full. And so I kind of always take it back to, it's really important to be my best self. Clients need to get the best out of me. And so it almost legitimizes me keeping space in my diary and saying no to certain things. I mean, I said to you today, I had somebody come through. I've worked with them before, and they said, oh, there's a couple of people I'd like you to coach. And now I could have thought, oh, I can shoehorn them in. That's not going to be a quality interaction for those 2 people. And it's public money, and I take that really seriously. And so I've had to go back and said, depends when you want to start. The earliest would be the new year. I'm sensing that won't work for them. And but yeah, the work that we do in the field of psychology or behaviour change or you know, mental health, we are the instrument. One of my mentors, Dr. Meanchun Judge, who passed away in August, but she wrote a brilliant article called The Self as an Instrument. And it's one that I get any practitioner that I'm mentoring, any student that I'm working with to read, because it's about how we show up as coaches, as practitioners, as consultants in the behaviour space. And we need to be our best selves. And to do that, we need to make sure we're giving ourselves sufficient space and time.
Yeah,
Sorry, that was a right old long answer, wasn't
no,
it?
it's a really good answer. A really good answer. I have to search that article as well.
I'll send it to you after the call.
Yeah, please, that would be fantastic. And as you was talking, I was thinking about a lot of it must be managing expectations, and again with expectations, I feel like a lot of it is self-fulfilled expectations. Sometimes it's like I'm juggling so many balls, but I'm fearful that I'm going to drop one. But actually, you drop one. You're a human being at the end of the day, or I'm worried about that client never working with me again in that situation, right? But again, these are all sort of like self-fulfilled expectations that we're putting on ourselves. So do you feel like you're quite good at that, kind of like, managing your expectations?
I'm getting better. I'm a work in progress. I'll probably be working on that till the day I die, to be honest. But yeah, I'm always working on that, definitely. And I think, again, I think in terms of expectations, I think that's why it's so important that we're clear on our expectations, but also setting that with whoever the kind of the client is, what they will and won't get. And again, then that gives them choice, agency about whether to work with you or not. But there's also something about having faith in yourself. It's why I keep what I call a lovely feedback file. Because, I have those moments of doubt and, an imposter phenomenon. And so I have a look at what clients have said. And, the fact that most of my work is either repeat business, so it's like past clients coming back to work with me on something different, or word of mouth, I don't have to market, tells me that to mostly what I'm doing is working well for the people that I'm here to serve. And so if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's also something around, I don't know if you found this maybe with some of the older women that you've met or spoken to, because I know a lot of the work that you've done has been around men and mental health. But one of the things I've really been finding, so I'm 48, I'm 49 soon. So I'm in perimenopause, and it's really affected my energy levels mentally. And so that's another reason why I take such care of my diary and time and space. So I've got a group of close friends. There's 6 of us from our undergrad days. So we've known each other 30 years, and we've seen each other, through all sorts of things. And now we're at the stage where all our WhatsApp conversations are about HRT and have you read Davina's new book, and I'm feeling really tired and I wanted to kill my partner, or I wanted to kill a member of staff, or and so my conversations have started, particularly with older female clients and some older male clients as well, have started to become about the next stage of life and how this can manifest in terms of mental health, in terms of energy levels, and I share my own experiences of that. But I've become hyper attuned to my energy and managing my diary around that.
Yeah, it's really good, because again, it's, as you say, it's consistently, as you shared earlier, you're consistently learning, and there's consistent like challenges that come your way, whether it's the loss of someone recently, or experiencing menopause, or men in particular, if you're going through then, a lot of guys get to like 40, start questioning a lot of stuff. So I think it's always ever evolving. And I think with mental health, we've always taken a very like short-term mindset of it. Like it's, once we do this, then we'll be fine. But it's consistently evolving. I've got a question that you mentioned. We speak about it a lot, in your opinions, psychological safety. So what have you seen to be really effective when it comes to creating psychologically safe environments at work?
Well, there isn't one thing. So that's the first thing I want to kind of head off at the pass, because, and you'll know this from the work that you do, everyone, and in particular organizations, are looking for that like magic thing. And there isn't one magic thing. Psychological safety, there are a number of things that are required to have a psychologically safe working environment. One of those things is how the leader shows up. Another thing is how the team members communicate with each other and interact with each other, and level of familiarity. Another thing is the kind of the protocols almost that you have in place for having difficult conversations, where maybe you've got a couple of people who are against the decision, and all of that stuff takes time, but it's possible with consistent and persistent effort. And so often when I'm working with groups of managers, for example, so when I do the high performing team course, we spend quite a lot of time looking at psychological safety and the ingredients, the factors of that help facilitate a psychologically safe work environment, you know, what the research tells us. And I can see in, so, you know, these are all knackered managers, you know, they're running busy services, and they kind of look at me and you can see some of them going, oh. And I kind of call that out, and I say, you know, everything's a choice. I can imagine you're sitting here looking at what I'm telling you, looking at the research, looking at the ingredients of psychological safety. There isn't one thing, there's a number of things, and a lot of it's you and how you show up. And you're sitting here thinking, oh, I just don't have it in me. And what I say to any group that I'm working with is, that's fine. That's a choice. That's your choice to carry on as you are and not do any of this stuff. But then you have to accept the consequences of that choice, which is you might not have as psychologically a safe environment as you would want. You might not have as high performing team or as a creative team as you want. But that's the consequence of your choice. So if you want, you know, a few of my friends have joked I should write, because my saying at the moment with lots of my clients and groups of leaders is, you can't have your cake and eat it. So a couple of my friends have said you should write a book called that. But it's the point that you're not going to get to the psychological safety utopia or the high performance, you know, super successful, highly engaged, highly motivated team without putting the hard work in yourself and help and creating spaces for others to put that work in. Don't work like that. So there isn't one silver bullet. Sorry, listeners. It takes showing up consistently, and it starts with you reflecting on who you are and the impact that you're having. What's the shadow that you're casting as a leader?
I love that. Yeah, it's like you say, it's an ever evolving journey, isn't it? It's like I talk about how, you know, we're very open about mental health now, more so than ever, but I'm in that bubble. I don't think that actually is true.
I agree.
When you step out of our bubble, there's a lot of people that still don't see it in the same way that we do. And also, like, I always do this in my talk. I ask people, you know, what's the first association you have when you hear the word mental? And they're like, crazy, mad. And I'm like, well, yeah, we are talking about this stuff more, but that's how long stigma will take. Because if we're all still naturally programmed to see mental as mad or crazy, you know, why? What have we seen, or what have we been taught? And then secondly, how much does that make it more of a challenge for us? So I'm 100% with you. It's like when you're looking at psychological safety or stigma or any of that, you can't just do a talk on World Mental Health Day. It can be as a small part of like starting that journey, but it takes a lot more. I'm conscious of time, but I've got 2 more questions I want to ask you. The first question is very much about what I get asked a lot. And because you work with a lot of managers and leaders, I wanted to ask you this question, which is, if someone's listened to this and they're in HR, or they're like, you know, been tasked with wellbeing, and they're struggling to get that buy-in, you know, they're struggling to get the leaders to say, hey, yeah, let's do it. Let's throw some money at this. Let's do this. Let's do that. And they're getting really negative responses to them wanting to do more. What advice would you give them to get that buy-in?
So there's a couple of things. So the first is, because that's quite a difficult one to answer, because it depends what's been put forward to whoever the decision maker or decision makers are. One of the things, and you all have seen this on things like LinkedIn and other media, one of the big criticisms from researchers in my field is lots of organisations jump to dealing with the symptom rather than the root cause. So let's put on a yoga retreat, or let's have a wellbeing strategy and health days and that stuff. And that's, in my experience, and certainly the evidence shows, that's a waste of time and money if you are not looking at the root causes of what's causing health, well-being, mental health issues at work. And we know that a lot of it is about there's just unrealistic expectations on people, you know, when there's been restructures and jobs have been cut, but the work hasn't gone anywhere. And suddenly you've got people having to do the work of 2 or 3 people. What do you think is going to happen? So there's something, I think, so there's an element of what have you put in front of the decision maker? There's one of the things that I get practitioners to think about, whether it's an HR director or whoever, is understanding what makes the decision maker tick. So if you're sitting down with the chief exec or whoever the decision maker is that you are putting your business case in front of, what makes them tick, what matters to them. And so if you're working with someone where it's the bottom line that matters most, then your business case had better be about the bottom line and backing it up with what the research tells us about the financial benefits of sorting this stuff out. So there's something really about really knowing who you are talking to when you're positioning your case. The second thing I'd suggest is, and I know this is easier for some practitioners than others, but there's always organisations you can reach out to give you some support around making the case. So, for example, some of my colleagues at Birkbeck, I'll send you the link. I shared it early on in the week on LinkedIn, but there's a company called Affinity Health at Work. So it's run by a group of occupational psychologists, and they've got free access to their research that they've done for organisations like ACAS and Health and Safety Executive, like toolkits for managers, toolkits for practitioners, all around wellbeing and health and mental health in the workplace, and practical things that can be done. So don't feel you have to do it on your own. There's stuff out there to help you, but there are people out there who might be able to help you as well make the case. And we know in some organisations, whether we like it or not, sometimes decision makers may well listen to an external point of view more. And so there's something about being savvy about how you do that. It might not feel empowering, but it can actually be a really powerful move to make in order to achieve the outcome you want to achieve as a practitioner. Hopefully that all makes sense.
Yeah, no,
I have a tendency to ramble, Paul.
No, really good. And again, it just highlights there's no one size fits all.
No.
Like, I remember once, I think it was David Durlacher, CEO of Julius Baer, who I've done loads of work with, and I remember like trying to like sell him on the finance point, because I was like, he's the CEO, right? So he's gonna love. And I think he was just like, no, I just want to know what impact you're going to make on my people, because it's the right thing to do, right? So it's like and we did an interview with him, and his approach is totally different.
Yes.
I think it's so important that you get that context, and what do they want to know? What do they want to understand about it? Because you can't just say, oh, well, all of our leaders want to make money, because that might not be
exactly. So what matters to them? So really getting to know whoever the decision maker is, whether it's the chief exec or the HR director or whoever, what really matters to them, what sense do you get of their principles and values, and then what's the language that seems to resonate with them, and make sure that your business case, the ideas that you're putting forward, are incorporating that language so that it's a form of connecting with them and getting that buy-in, rather than putting forward a kind of a standard bland business case based on what others have done. And that's worked for their context. It doesn't mean it works for yours. And as I say, one of the things that I'm passionate about is helping HR and OD and similar practitioners become even more evidence-based in the stuff that they put forward. What do case studies say? What does the evidence say? What's the context you're operating in? What does the research, any kind of empirical research say? And weaving that together. What does your own judgment say? Weaving that together to create as thorough and holistic a business case as possible that leaves no stone unturned. Really important. Nice. I've got one final question, which is a bit of a personal one. I should have prepped you. It's not this. We've gone deeper. We've gone deeper than this question, Hayley. Can you share one piece of advice that you've been given in the past that's resonated the most with you? Yeah. it's one that's stuck with me for the last almost 25 years. So I mentioned her earlier, so Dr. Mian Chun Judge. I was lucky enough to have her as a kind of mentor, if you like, when I started out in my career. She took me under her wing, very wise woman. And I remember her saying to a couple of us, particularly because of the kind of work we were doing. So at that point, we were really specialising in organisational development and culture change. And a lot of that, as I say, is about how you yourself as an instrument and how you show up. You know, you are affecting the environment by how you show up as a practitioner. And she was saying that when you are working as an organisational development culture change practitioner, that can sometimes put you in really awkward situations because your ethics might be questioned. You might be walking that tightrope of what's ethically right. You might have to speak truth to power. Often you have to speak truth to power and not be thanked for it, and it can be quite brutal. And so, and you could end up in an environment that just is really unhealthy for you. It just doesn't work. And so she said, you know, as soon as you are able to, she said, I know you're all starting out in your careers, but as soon as you're able to, squirrel a little bit of money away each month and get yourself to a point where you never leave yourself vulnerable to having to stay somewhere where you are ethically compromised and you are deeply unhappy, because that's going to affect the work that you do. So try and get yourself to a point where you have at least 3 months salary saved to cover your overheads so that you could comfortably walk away, even if you go and get an interim job or something. And I remember when she told us that, the couple of people that she was talking to, when she told us that, at that point I was living on overdraft all the time. So I was like, what are you going on about? You know, I was in my mid-20s. But it stuck in my brain. And so, yeah, as the years went on, I really kind of squirreled stuff away. And then when I ended up in a variety of different leadership roles in local government, one of which I experienced extreme burnout, I became mentally and physically unwell. That's when that was like 15 odd years later. That's when her wisdom really kicked in, because I'd built up this pot of money. You know, I'm the main wage earner in our family. My husband isn't able to work because of illness. And when the time was right, we had a year's worth of overheads, like money behind us, enough to live comfortably and pay the mortgage for a year so that I could leave. And so that advice has always stuck with me, and it's something that I always impart to those starting out in their careers as OCS and culture change experts, because the work that we do is often about how we show up and what we role model and the impact we have. It's really important that we are empowered to walk away if we need to. And you can only do that practically if you've squirreled some money away. I know that's not easy for everyone. It certainly wasn't easy for me, as I say at the start, living on hand to mouth overdraft. But when you're able to get to that point, do it, because it can be life-changing and empowering.
Such good advice. There's a good book. Have you read Richest Man in Babylon?
No, but I've heard a lot about it.
It's one of the strangest books that I've read, but equally there's like some really key money lessons that have stood the test of time. And it's kind of as you've just shared there. It made me open up my eyes to, when I earned more, I spent more. And you earn more and you spend more. You earn more and you spend more. And it's like, you know, and then that's when, in a situation of being in a corporate environment, you can get very attached to that role, right? Because now you've got this huge salary, now you've got this huge mortgage, now you've got this car and finance, you're stuck. There's a lack of freedom there that can become quite, you know, it's hard to feel empowered in those moments. So I love that advice, to be able to give you that sense of freedom as well.
Well, can I share a quick anecdote on the back of that? Please. So I was saying to my husband's stepmother the other day that I had a big clear out. It was long overdue. I hadn't cleared out my clothes or shoes since I left corporate life in 2016. And I was starting to feel like I couldn't breathe. There was just stuff everywhere. And I cleared out bags and bags. Some of the clothes still had labels on. And it was because I was in a highly paid role, really high profile role, but I was miserable. And the way that I offset that misery was just by buying stuff. Ironically, I've become as tight as you like, which just makes me laugh. But I don't feel the need to buy material goods because I'm so happy with where I am. And, you know, I'm not mega rich. I'm not like earning six figures, and that's a choice because I want to do good and interesting work, but I'm earning a comfortable living. And we go on holiday and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm not spending money on material things that actually bring me no joy. And as I say, I was just mortified to find clothes with labels on and shoes that I'd never worn and bags. And it's just because I was so unhappy. And it's really interesting what you say. I was spending money on stuff, which I didn't need to once I became happy.
Yeah, so true. I will ask you just quickly about the sketches, right? Because everyone asks you about the sketches, and I haven't asked you about the sketches. How long did they take you? Because they're incredible.
So on average, they take me about an hour and a half. So I've been doing them since the end of 2016, and I'm always shocked at when quite a few of them go viral. God, I sound really poncy saying that, but quite a few of them go. I'll wind your neck in, but it's not completely altruistic. I do them as a way to solidify my own understanding of stuff, but also I'm passionate about making what I think are really useful concepts or sometimes really inaccessible studies behind paywalls accessible to the people that I really want to help. You know, I think if we can help managers and leaders be better at what they do, have a better impact on the people around them, the world will be a better place. And one of the ways we can do that is help them by making stuff more accessible. So that's really and who doesn't love a bit of colouring in? I find it's almost like a form of meditation, Paul. You know, get my felt tip pens out and it's tapping back into that 4-year-old Hayley.
Yeah,
but this time I stay inside the lines.
I think it's communication, isn't it? It's like, you know, some people really like diving deep into the research and the data, and other people like seeing a little image, and you know, some people like reading a quote or, you know, watching something on TV. I just think it's we just need to get the messages out in loads of different ways, and I think your sketches do that.
Well, and it's in a hyper-connected, always-on, really frenetic. We're just being bombarded with stuff, you know, in the 21st century. You know, every day there's like a new platform to get your head around, and I think anything that can kind of cut through that noise. And it's also one of the reasons. So lots of people say they really appreciate the fact that I give references. It's the academic in me, and I love it when people choose to dive a bit deeper. So I give them enough. Yeah. But if they want to go off and dive a bit more and learn a bit more, that just gladdens my heart. And ultimately that for me is what it's all about.
Amazing. Well, Hayley, thank you for showing up today, and thank you for, and when I say showing up, I mean like personally showing up.
I know what you meant.
Sharing your story rather than just like turning up. And also thank you for all the work that you do. I think it's incredible, and it's been a very easy conversation. So finally, where can people find out more about you if they want to get in touch?
So the place that I lurk the most is LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I've got lots of free resources on my website, which I'm guessing you can put in your show notes. Yeah. So yeah, there's lots of stuff for people to pillage, free ebooks and all sorts of stuff to help people have happier, healthier working lives.
Amazing. And we'll link up to all of that. But no, Hayley, thank you.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for asking me.
No worries. It's been incredible speaking to you.
Thank you.